I felt better about the things that I did accomplish, and therefore I got more stuff done. It seems so counterintuitive to me, but it involved, trusting myself. And I think, hello, writers and crafters, I'm Valerie Son.
And I'm Erick Mertz.
And this is episode 142 of the podcast. And it's January 3rd, 2024, as we record this. Today, we had a request from a listener that we go over our year in review, kind of talking about mistakes we've made or things that we are really glad we did, and then, kind of slingshot that into 2024 and kind of set up like goals, plans, just thoughts about 2024 in general. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We want to thank all of our existing patrons for believing in our work offline and here on the podcast. You can become a patron of the arts by going to patreon.com/Valerie Isan for books, writing instruction, coaching, and planning, and patreon.com/Strange Air Stories for short stories in the paranormal mystery genre. Let's see, announcements. Still plugging that early, it's the early bird registration is over. So we're at the regular registration for the 2024 Writer Craft Writing Retreat. And again, there are only 4 private tickets left, and there's a few shared ones if you want to share a unit with someone. We will likely sell out again. So valerieisan.com/retreat for more information, and that'll be in the show notes as well. The new anthology by Tsunami Press is now everywhere. You can buy books. So if you didn't want to go to tsunamibooks.org/shop, then you could just go to any bookstore that you like and order it. And my essay, Eye Contact, is in there, and it's getting rave reviews.
Rave.
It's getting rave reviews. Season of the Shadow is up now. It's been out for a couple months. You can go to where can people go to buy the Season of the Shadow?
We're on Amazon exclusive. Print is taking a little longer, as one would expect, I guess. Everything takes a little longer at this time of year. But I should have the print version up in a couple of weeks.
Okay, cool.
So
update. I just
got
got back yesterday from a trip to the coast, the Oregon coast. We went to Seaside, which I don't normally go up that far north. We usually stick somewhere closer, Newport or Florence or something like that. But we wanted to go and meet some friends that were further north. They were in Washington State, so we were trying to find a place that was a little closer for them so we could meet, not halfway, but it was a little easier on them to drive.
Right.
So that we did.
That's quite a drive for you from Springfield, right? I mean,
it was like 3-hour drive.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
It wasn't too bad. What else did I do before we left? I did do some thinking about January and like I did my December monthly reflection and then looked to January and looked to see what I kind of want to accomplish for January. That's about as far as my planning has gone. And I think that's pretty much my update right now. I went on vacation, did some reflection. What about you?
That. Well, it's been a couple of weeks, right? With some holidays smack dab right in the middle there.
Yeah.
Well, I've been really hammering away on book 1 in new series. I wrote the reader magnet for that series. I've mapped out the 3 books. I've mapped out a lot of the series, and I've started writing the first book for it. And it's been, again, I kind of feel like I'm collecting a lot of old ideas and putting them and giving them new life. It's been a product of moving, I think, 4 months ago. Like I kind of moved all my archives from a house I lived in for 12 years. And I was kind of forced to look at it. And I was forced to decide what to keep and what to let go. And
Well,
so when
you
the idea of like maybe putting together a new series to write in tandem with my other series came to me, it was all fresh on my mind, just sort of these old notions that I'd been, that I'd explored and set aside. So yeah, I've got, I think 9,000 words into a new story. Um, Something I think has legs, and yeah.
So I have a question about your story idea production team in your brain. I can just see them like working up there frantically in their
I
cubicles.
and when I see them, I picture like the elves from the movie Elf, they're
Yeah.
just yeah, that's what I picture, what they're doing up there. But
So, how do you, I mean, you have a plethora of ideas, which is not something that everyone struggles with. Let's just say that. So, you've got all these
yes.
ideas. How do you reconcile, or do you have this problem at all, starting a story and then not being interested in it and putting it down and picking up another story idea? Like, I think that some people, and I might even include myself in this, get a story idea and think, oh, yes, this is going to be awesome. And then by the time you like kind of get around to it, it's like, I don't know if I want to spend a year working on this, but you know what I mean? Being
Right.
with this stories exclusively.
I think this was a real problem for me for a long time because I felt like every idea was had to be actualized, and then I realized like that just can't work for me. It just can't. I don't There's too many ideas that churn, and when I'm honest with myself, which is I think the key to anything, when I'm honest with myself, I'll sit down and start writing some of them, and it's like, all right, I'm forcing it at this point, or I'm looking at my phone, or I'm easily distracted. Like when the story really pulls me in and it won't let me go, um, then I know to explore it. And I don't. So I know that's a really generic, like probably anybody who has this affliction would say the same thing, but there's just this kind of feeling I've learned to recognize that says, okay, you're really forcing this right now. Like this is not something you're gonna be able to fulfill. And then there's other things where the longer I sit with them, the more comes out of them. It's like, oh my gosh, these things just keep coming. And then it's just also this sort of pattern recognition in my own creative mind, I guess, where I've just realized that I've been noodling with certain ideas forever. Certain core concepts just keep coming back. It's like I've tried looking at that story idea from this angle and then that angle and then this angle, and then I've learned to recognize like, oh hey, this is a story idea this is something you've been really working on for a long time. Let's see what other approaches you've had. And oftentimes that just, yeah, I don't necessarily go back to those old ideas, but it definitely gives me uh, a baseline to start working. So that's a long-winded way of saying I think it's just understanding my own rhythm. And I just trashed like 3 short stories that were sitting on my desk this last week, just
Trash
because I
does
just knew
in.
they weren't. I'm never gonna. I'm forcing this story. I like the idea, but the longer I look at this idea, the more either I've tried to force it to work. That's what I guess I'm resisting. Is I'm always resisting the I'm going to force this thing to work. If it's working, if the story and I are working together, then I know to pursue it. But if I'm working too hard to make that story happen, it's time for it to go.
Well, that
And there was
sounds
just some
all
stories.
lovely and everything in theory, but we all know about like the soggy middle and stuff. And sometimes writing is not fun. So, how do you tell the difference between, okay, this story is not working, I'm trying too hard, and okay, I need to buckle down because this is not working. And how can I make this more interesting? I need to, you know what I mean? Like,
I
where do you
I
cut
think
bait?
you just I think it's when I'm forcing that sort of, like when I'm either forcing the character or I'm forcing that, like it's always this the establishment of setting, character, and inciting incident. That's usually where the germ of a story starts for me, is just right there.
Mhm.
um And that's where I'll sort of work off of it. What could happen if this? What could happen if that? Still, staying in that moment of Genesis, I'll start trying to pull strings and see where it goes. Um, I know that a story really works is when I've without effort, I've gotten past that inciting incident. I'm already into the act two of the story, and I'm still excited about what's popping up. Um, because you're getting from inciting incident to resolution in a story. That's a story's arc.
Mhm.
And if I'm populating the middle of that, if I'm populating act two with exciting stuff, I know it's going to work because act two is that, like you said, it's kind of the soggy middle of like, well, the icing's great, the outside ring of the cake is fine, but that middle is just not good. I don't
A
know.
bit
There's just a certain
stodgy.
feel. Stodgy. You're right. Oh God, I love the British baking show. Um, I just,
Claggy. I like
yeah, there's just,
claggy. That's the one that's like, oh, no, you don't want any clagginess.
I don't know. It's like an airport conversation, right? Like there's not every airport conversation is memorable, but when you're sitting down with someone, I think I know immediately, like, all right, this person's great. This is a memorable conversation. Let's keep it going. Um, it's just, yeah, when that is coming for me, that's what happened with this series. I feel like we're going down a rabbit hole and I love it. But
Mhm.
that's what kind of happened with this story idea. Like I got this inciting incident. I got the establishment of setting and character for both villain and hero. And I started to like put the pieces together. And I was probably, I don't know, I could grab the notebook that I was writing in. I was probably 10 pages of handwritten notes and ideas before I looked back and said, "Oh my gosh, I'm like all the way through, almost all the way through an act, what feels like an act two." And that's supposed to be the hard part of the story to come up with. It's supposed to be what do I do in act two? Well, if boy, when I was excited about act two scenes and developments, I was like, all right, I'm going to be excited to write this. There's nothing in this that feels like I'm forcing it. And I think I don't know, when an idea just takes on an energy and it takes me on a ride, um, let's go. Let's go. Where are we going? Idea.
That's
And
awesome.
there also is, and I'm not going to pat myself on the back, but I think there is courage in throwing it away too. You just have to have the
Mm.
courage to toss it and say, again, I was working on a story. I started writing this story. Um, I started writing this story at the day of Passover Seder. So it was like thanks. It was I was going to say Thanksgiving. It was like in April. I've been just sort of noodling on this idea. And after all that time, I looked at it and said, I am so far from magic with this story. It's time to let it go. There's just no magic left in it. So I don't know.
I guess I want
Story has to feel magic.
recognition for having done work that I'm now tossing. And I don't need it from anyone else, really. I just need it from myself somehow. And I think I need to come up with some like momentary, like ritualistic um I don't know, phrase or just some sort of acknowledgement that I make to myself that yes, this was a story idea I had. I tried to start it and it just isn't doing it for me. And it's okay to move on. And this is just writerly play or research or, like acknowledge it somehow. My friend Steve had us, he was talking about, we were talking about books that I start and don't finish, but I still want the recognition of having started the book. And so he came up with the books I have tasted list in my planner.
Oh,
So I
I
want to
love it.
have, something like that with like, okay, that was a story idea that didn't work. Or I don't know. I mean, I don't need to write it down or anything, but just some sort of like, it's okay
I
that
think
this didn't
having
go anywhere.
I think having a respect for, I mean, it's sort of like Memorial Day, right? I mean, Memorial Day is right. You just have to I think there has to be, as a writer, there has to be a number of stories that didn't work. Yeah, I think that's just accepting that, you have to write five in your head to get one that you're willing to, for me, this is sort of my math. Like I'll get five ideas in my head and maybe one of those makes it to paper. And of three of them that make it to paper, one of those get finished. And that I just have to be satisfied with that. And I think but I have to be satisfied with that because I also, on the other hand, trust the idea that I'll be walking my kid into basketball practice tonight and I'll get a flash of an idea in the lighting in the gymnasium and I'll be sitting there while the kids are practicing, writing down an idea for a story. Like I have to, I always trust that there's, no matter what I do, when it comes to disposing of an idea, that another one is going to pop up. That's never going to be the problem. I think that's what you should strive for,
Yeah.
is build, like, couple that that memorializing with trust, that like this
Hmm.
will happen. Another one will happen.
I think that's it. I think that it stems from a fear of I'm never going to have another idea. This one has to work. And then when it's
And
like
I,
not doing it, I'm like sad because I'm like, oh no, it's going to be fallow
and it's
time again. I'm not going to come up with another
right.
idea.
I think just trusting and curiosity too. I was in the car the other day. It was like a kind of a cold, foggy morning. And, I'm in this drowsy state, and this police car comes speeding from the direction I was going. And I remember, like, the first thought that went into my mind was, what could be happening? Like, what is going on? Right.
Hmm.
And the whole rest of that drive, I was making up a story of like, why that cop is driving so fast from that place. And by the time I got I think I was going to my mom's house. By the time I got there, I was like, well, there's nothing to write here. But that's the thing that I'm trusting is always going to happen. I'm just never going to look at a situation with a question and not want to answer it,
Hmm.
And that's part of what the story proposition is, right? Is that, like, we're going to answer a question that the reader has, or the
Yeah.
character. We
What are
got
you
onto a
reading?
subject there, and
I
we're not even
know.
to the subject. That's
I know,
great. I
but
love it.
I think it's great too. So what are you reading?
I had to put. So here's the thing. I had a couple of like oddball books from the library before
Hmm.
the end of the year, and I had to keep this one because it's a Japanese name. It's called Nejishiki, and it's a collection of like 60s um, manga from like one of the early like sort of manga artists from the 1968. Um, and it's just this really surreal, bizarre, uh, animated like dreams. And they're like kind of post-war Japan. They're really bizarre. Like, I picked it up from the library, and because the cover looked really weird,
You see
and
the cover.
the cover, I don't know if you can see it. It's like a little boy kind of walking through a field of laundry that's being hung out to dry. Um, the dreams are all like, I'm fascinated by Japanese culture. I'm not one of those people that, like, lives in manga land or lives in
Hmm.
Godzilla land, but I'm very fascinated in the cultural differences and, storytelling, and especially where like horror and surreal things come in, because there's definitely some cultural differences in what scares people, and, from country to country or culture to culture.
Hmm.
And I find the jet what I find I guess I just find what frightens Japanese people very, very interesting. Um, it's always very unsettling to me, and there's a lot of unsettling in this book, and I'm glad I read it. So, but I'm gonna need a palate cleanser after this. I finished this last night, and I realized, like, between that and watching Succession on HBO's Succession, I'm gonna need something really sweet. I'm gonna need, like, give me some sweet books. So if
Sweet.
anybody has any recommendations for like just sweet, nice books, put them in the notes, put them in a comment, and I'll gladly pick it up because I need something kind of hunky
What
dory.
about
I had
Becky
this high school.
Chambers' series of books on the Monk and Robot series? So
Oh, okay.
Psalm for the Wild Built is the first book, and then Prayer for the Crown Shy, I think, is the second book. I actually like the second book better, but they're
I
both
had a
like just really sweet short books about
okay.
it's about humanity, but it's about a robot learning about humanity, I think, you know.
I had this high school English teacher. I remember for some reason I read American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis when I was in high school, mainly because probably some other cool kid was reading it. And I remember going to my high school English teacher and saying, like, God, I just read this, like, really, it's just that's a disturbing book. in every possible way. And I remember her getting all fussy and saying, "Oh, Eric, go read The Hobbit. Go read The Hobbit. Cleanse your palate." And so I've that at 16, I had this like I've always had this idea of a palate cleanser book. You know, when you've
Mhm.
gone too far into like something, you've got
Right.
to get a palate cleanser. What are you reading?
I am still reading Ma and Me, by, I never can say her name, Putsana Reang. Um, and I think it's because it was my last book of the stack, that I had been reading all at the same time. And so I
Right.
finally gotten back to that book, though I still haven't had, a nice hour to sit and just read. I keep doing it in little tiny chunks, which is fine because memoir sometimes can be, she's writing in sort of shorter snippets, like this is a story that her mother told her, or this is how she's feeling about this particular, so they're written in shorter segments. So it's okay, but I'm still not totally into the book yet. And again, I think
Okay.
that's reader error. It has nothing to do
Right. Right.
with her. I also did pick up, I'm sorry to say, another book to be reading at the same time. Um, because, well, I have reasons. But anyway, it's called Praying with Jane Eyre, by Vanessa
Oh,
Zoltan. So it's a memoir about like this reading sacred texts and how different books can be sacred texts. She was an atheist pastor, I think. I think that's how she said on the book flap. I think that's how they identified her. And she was, walking around doing her rounds for, bringing, I don't know, not prayer and delight, but like, comfort or whatever. And the Bible that she carried around with her was Jane Eyre. So she was talking about how to make, any text sacred. And I just started it. So
interesting.
um, yeah. And then I started, since it's January 3rd, I started a new day book because I like having that practice of reading a little snippet of something before I journal in the mornings.
Hmm.
And the last one, I had to add it to the books I tasted because I never finished. I went through maybe 3 or 4 months of reading it as a day book, and it just didn't work. And that was, I don't know if I should say it on here, but it's the second time I've tried to read that book. So I think maybe I should just let it go. But it's one I really
Okay.
wanted it to work. And so I bought it twice. But that was Meditations on the Mat. It's kind of
Hmm.
a yoga day book, really. Anyway, so the new one is The Book of Awakening by Mark Nepo. I don't know if you know that or not, but
I don't, but I didn't know that what we would call that kind of book, and I always have something like that around. Um, I mean, so are you talking about like, so I just keep there's an issue of Poetry magazine sort of everywhere in this house. And if I have 5 minutes to kill while Elijah's brushing his teeth or something, I will read out of that. It's just something that's there to keep me from picking up a remote control or a
mhm,
device, or to read in the morning while waiting for the water to boil. It's like kind of that thing where it's like, I like the randomness of like I'm not reading this book to finish it. I'm reading through it, but I'm not trying to finish it. I'm just it's here because it's here to present randomness to me. Is that what
mhm.
you could call a day
That
book?
that is not what I would call a day book, only because maybe it's, well, this particular day book has like January 3rd. Today I read January 3rd's
Oh,
entry,
okay.
but other books I've used as like what you're saying, kind of like Catching the Big Fish. Like there's no dates to that. They're just short little tiny essays about creativity and meditation and stuff. So yeah, that would be something that was what I was doing with Catching the Big Fish. Is that what it's called?
Okay.
Catching the
Yep.
Big, yeah, Catching the Big Fish
I need
by
to pull that
David
off the
Lynch.
shelf because you keep talking about it and I keep remembering like little fun bits from that. There's like one of those little things is like a clown, a melting ice cream cone, a 1957 Cadillac. I have no idea what these things have in common, but I think of them together. It was just some like random bunch of stuff that gave you a view into David Lynch's mind. I love it. Love it. Anyway,
All right, well, let's
talk
talk
about 2023
about,
and 24.
yeah, let's talk. So shout out to Chad. Thanks, Chad, for the idea.
Thanks,
Um,
buddy.
so we are, so normally when I haven't done my review yet, Eric. So
Mm.
actually, plug again for Patreon. If you are at the level of tier level where this is included, tonight I have scheduled, or actually this afternoon at 4 o'clock, I have scheduled an end of the year review. So taking a couple hours and going through, you know, all of asking my end of year review questions that I do every year, and just looking through my planner really, and just seeing like what I accomplished and that sort of thing. And so I haven't done that yet. That's scheduled for today. So I'm kind of going into this um not blind, but just I haven't spent a long time thinking about it yet,
Right.
but that might make a cool conversation.
Yeah, I did this on Saturday morning. My kid plays Pokemon on Saturday morning, and I just usually go to the cafe or bar that's on either side of the game store where he plays, and either I do some work or I read, or this happened to be the time that I sat down and thought, like, all right, like what I don't know. I don't look back so much on these kind of in this exercise as I try to look forward, but I kind of forced myself this time to really look back at the year and say, all right, like it maybe will help to know where I come, like where this goal is coming from, like what gap this goal seeks to fill. So yeah, I did a little of it on Saturday morning. But on an odd note, there was a guy in the bar that I was sitting in, and he needed to be excused from the establishment because of his behavior,
Hmm.
if that's a good way to put it. And so it was a little distracting. One of my goals was not be that guy. So if I say that, that's why.
I've never
So how
known
do
you
you
to
want to
be that
start?
guy.
I've never not that guy. But when you see that guy, you say to yourself, okay, what somewhere his life got him there. If I
Hmm.
don't step out on that branch of the tree, then I won't get there. So um I think that for me, just I'll kind of throw out there the first, like I think for me, I look back at a year and I it's hard for me to see past the accomplishments and the things that worked. Um, but I am by nature, when it comes to this type of thing, very critical of not critical. I am ambitious and um I am creative, and so I want to, if I have a good year, I look back on a good year and say, how do I have a better year? um and so one of the things I acknowledged about last year versus that I wanted to alleviate was I needed to work smarter and not harder. um I always have more clients than I can handle. The client uptick, it's either more responsibility, and so that leads to more work, or it's either more client servicing or it's more work time. And I always look at, how do I so I take that frustration and I try to look at, like, what can I do in this year to feel a little less constrained by the client side of my business. And I don't mean this like the client side of my business is successful and it's exactly, it's where I would like it to be. I do find myself often like frazzled. And so I tried to set some goals for 2024 that would say, I want to work smarter and not harder, for sure. Because I do think there were times in 2023 when my wife and kid would go do something on Sunday and I would sneak off and work for 2 hours. I don't necessarily want to do that in 2024.
I looking at 2023, first thing I want to do is acknowledge all the good stuff.
Yeah.
You're like, I look past that. Well, that's like my main highlight for doing reflection is to acknowledge and celebrate the wins because I
Yes.
often forget, and that's why I really like this reflection process and why I do it every month. Because when you come to the end of the year, you think, well, what did I do all year long? And if you have some sort of written record of in January, I did this, and in February, I did this, you can see the small things that add up to the big wins too. So
Yes.
I did publish my memoir this last
Yay.
year, 2023. So that had been like on my docket for many years, and I had kind of fallen out of publishing, and so that felt really good to accomplish and was really a large part of actually 2022 also because I did publish the memoir early on in the year. Um, I also have been thinking a lot about sustainability in business and how to, like you, make systems work so that the so that it fits into a regular life, like we all, especially as self-employed, you know, business owners, it is hard to segregate your business and life. And sometimes we don't want to, but also, like you said, you don't want to necessarily sneak off on a Sunday when you could be with your family and doing some work instead. So yeah, the whole concept of segregating and not segregating and the home life balance and how to make it all work so that it is sustainable and there's no burnout and no resentments and no workaholic stuff. So that's been on my mind kind of off and on throughout the year 2023 as well. I don't know that I
I think
have
it's
any
great
like,
that,
burning like epiphanies from it. Um, I do think that my physical health um, and my mental health are more, I mean, yeah, I'll know that they're related, but still,
yeah,
it takes a couple of like, oh, moments where you fully integrate that they are related. Like I need to keep my physical health premium so that I can have the mental health as
right,
well.
right, right. I think you hit on something that I always think about when I do any sort of looking, kind of, I don't know, you can kind of look at these things as like you can look at these things a lot of ways, right? They have a lot of dimensions, and so you can choose to look at them. When it comes to running a small business, you can look at them a lot of different ways. And I think one of the things I have to always, for me, keep myself reminded of is it's wonderful. Like I hear people around the holidays say, "Oh, I've got to work the day after Christmas," and "Oh, I don't have any PTO." And I hear that from my friends, and there's a part of me that says I can work on a Saturday if I want to have Monday off, or I can take Monday off. I can kind of do how I want to do,
Hmm.
as long as all the boxes are being checked. But then there becomes a slippery slope of it, if I can work on a Saturday, what stops me from working on any Saturday?
Hmm.
And so I think that part of the reflection goal setting is always like you have to balance it all. Like, what is really the goal, right? Like, if the goal is to, increase income and reduce, sort of friction in work, then you set out on that goal. Like, so I think just having like you've got to look, you can't look back in a reactionary way. I think that's what happens. That happened to me a lot in business where I would look at, gosh, this is so frustrating. What can I do in an immediate, literal sense to solve
Hmm.
this frustration, when really it might have been a bigger picture thing. It might have been more of a mindset thing. So I think getting out of reactionary is so important, to really looking forward in a creative and self-respectful way. And that's also a hat tip to that idea of mental health, right? If you're driving yourself so hard, you're gonna make yourself miserable.
So what do you do to not be in that reactive mode? Do you have tips and tricks?
I think it's very similar to what we were talking about story, right? Like I have to trust that no one decision is going to make or break a business that's now 11 years in successful 11 years. No one decision I make is going to make or break it. That's obviously like I'm sure I could break this thing if I really wanted to. But if I choose to hire let's for example, one of the things I put on my potential list is like hiring a virtual assistant. I spend 3 to 4 hours a week doing stuff that I could hire a virtual assistant to do, and that would free me up to finish more work. That finishing more work would get me paid, and I could, right? Like I have to like, kind of look at that as like, if that didn't work, if it was a disaster, if it would cost more money, if it wouldn't make or wouldn't break my business. And if I got value for that time, it wouldn't make my business. So taking some of the pressure off of decisions and
Hmm.
realize you're making one decision in 100 decisions as a business person is, I don't know, it makes me feel so much more at ease with the whole process. Like I may hire a virtual assistant in February. And again, this isn't going to save me from myself. It's not going to, but it's also not going to break me if in May I look at it and say, this doesn't work. Um, and that's kind of anything, when I look at any of these goals, like I made a bunch of, like, I want to have these lingering projects done by this time. They're not going to make me or break me. Um, they're just part of that continuum. So I think take some pressure off people when you're looking forward.
I think that, I hinted to that in December about I'm still going to be setting goals, but I'm not going to be looking at weekly goals, at least for January. And I'm thinking I want to extend that. I'm already planning on extending that to February. So for the first couple of months of the year, I want to just, um, you know, as I said last time, aligned action is kind of those are my buzzwords for 2024. So I want to be able to, here's the thing, and I know that I've brought this up on the podcast before, so I don't want to like repeat myself too much, but there was a time in my life, it was 2020, it was 2017, I think. Yeah, 2017 and 2018, where I discovered through a bunch of different things that if I had a master list of things that I would like to accomplish in my business and not have a timeline on them, instead just have like blocks of time during the day that I worked on my business, that I could do anything on that list and still be making forward momentum, still taking action steps, still, still accomplishing things. And I didn't have the added internal self-imposed stress of a deadline that made it so I wasn't getting my work done if I didn't get the thing on the list done by the date that I arbitrarily set. So I would like to get back to that kind of mindset. Really was helpful, like mental health wise. I felt better about the things that I did accomplish, and therefore I got more stuff done. It seems so counterintuitive to me, but it involved, trusting myself. And I think this seems to be kind of a buzzword too that we come up with today. I've been hearing the word trust a lot, trusting in the process, trusting in ourselves, trusting that another idea will come, trusting that, I don't have to make the perfect decision right now because all decisions, work. Like there's no good or bad decision. They all they're all learning experiences, and we can always make another decision if the first one didn't go according to, the way we thought it would. So having
Right.
this trust in, I can be productive, trust in, I know what intuitively needs to be done in my business. I don't need to be so rigid about, I'm going to finish this by this week and I'm going to work on it on Thursday. I mean, there's some good points to doing that. And that's a
Yeah.
trick that I've used for years, and it does work. And I do want to continue to use that as a tool, but I don't want to use it as a crutch. And I feel like that's where I've kind of gotten myself into, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think that there's this temptation that I always have to, if I overstress the importance of something, then I'm going to be more likely to get it done. And I've just found that doesn't work. That's not true about me. Um, in fact, I think now I've gotten to a point, and maybe this is just a product of age or a product of well, let's just call it a product of wisdom. Like, let's just hope it's a product of wisdom and not something else. But um, like if I put pressure on myself to do something, I'm probably going to resist doing it. And it's probably more of an indication of like, that's really not aligned. Like I actually thought a lot about your aligned action statement when I was sitting down on Saturday, when I was not resisting the temptation to watch the train wreck of a person across the bar from me. Um, I like there's some things that are on my to-do list forever, and I keep reminding myself, since you said that, like, this may be that thing is not aligned with what I really want, and I'm
Mhm.
resisting it that way. So yeah, I think that resist I think sometimes, like, you listen to what you want and try to go in that direction, but also listen to where you're maybe not, where you don't want to go, because maybe there's something there.
Mhm. So is there
Yeah.
anything from 2023's list that you have decided to not do for 2024 that still ended up on the
Things from a
list?
to-do list, like from the goal list.
Yeah. Or, I mean, you can take that to mean whatever you want it to mean. It can be more
I think
abstract than that.
one of the things I'm doing, okay, I'm going to answer this question in the most roundabout Erick possible way. I decided that I always tear up my to-do list and tear up my sort of like, all right, when I set my December goals, I write it on a piece of scratch paper and I put it in the front of the calendar. And then I, like, throughout January, I'm always looking at that. And when January's done, I move the things I didn't do into February and then I toss it. I decided not to do that this year because I can't tell you where my mind was in January 3rd, 2020 or 2023.
Mhm.
Um, I decided that I was going to keep all the to-do lists and monthly goal lists and quarterly goal lists in a book, and I wasn't going to tear it up when it was over, so that I would be able to look back at a certain point in the year and say, oh, wow, I've been trying to do this since, forever, and now it's still sitting here. Um, so I could have that, more of that reflection.
Mhm.
Um, I think that if anything, I'm gonna kind of leave behind in 2023 is this scattered feeling of, I just always have this scattered feeling. Part of what we talked about earlier, always fielding ideas and always filtering them out leaves me sometimes feeling scattered when I need to be practical.
Mhm.
Um, so I've really made it a focus in 2024 to, sort of measure a little bit more, to be more planful about, kind of not just writing something because I want to write it, as much as I'm going to write something and I know where it fits and I'm willing to pursue it. So I'm challenging myself to be a little more looking longer down the road.
That's
I don't know if that really addressed your question, but it's where my mind went when you asked it.
then it's the perfect answer.
I'm gonna use that in life later today, I'm sure.
That you always have the perfect answer?
No, just like that. Like, if it's, yeah, if it's the answer that I came to naturally, then it's the right then it was the right
Mhm.
answer to the question. Um, Yeah, I don't know. I really want to know more about, I really want to know more about like the totality of my ambition and how to focus it. And I'm not going to get that by throwing away to-do lists and goal lists. I'm only going to get that when I'm able to reflect a little bit.
Hmm.
Um, but I'll tell you, 2024, like I have had probably on my website to-do list since 2019 is to create create video content for my blogs and my website, because like everyone I've ever worked with on my site has said, the site is really good, but if you had video on these blogs, it would boost and it would really boost them. Um, and boy, 2019, I had this conversation. Um, and in 2024, I'm still sitting here, and I really need to do that. If that's the next thing I need to do on a website, then why am I chasing my tail doing other things? Um, if I know that's the one thing that will that's what I don't listen to enough, I think, is like I can sit down with a list of like things to do, and I can identify the one that is going to make the most impactful difference. I just don't always do that thing.
Just
And
knowing, I think, is fantastic, because that's the part that a lot of people, myself
struggle with.
included, struggle with. Yeah. Knowing what's that one thing. If people knew what the one thing to do to, grow their business, there would be no struggling businesses. So knowing the thing is like
Oh, every website
superpower. That's
person has said,
amazing.
you could write a blog every week and that will be good. You could create 15 videos for your 15 highest ranking blogs on your site, and that would be tremendous. And every time I hear that, I think, all right, we're going to do this. And then I don't. And that might be because it doesn't align with my values or something. I
Hmm.
don't know. It might be that it's something I've never done. And so I have a bit of trepidation about, you know, taking that step. I don't know. It is in my list. It was like the first thing I wrote down for Q1 2024 is basically like, do it or get off the pot. Like you can't sit here in this space for 5 years and know you should do something and not do it. It's like, it's like that whole gym thing. If you don't go to the gym, every day you don't go to the gym, the next day gets harder. So it's either do it or don't. All right. So, well, hopes for 2024, looking forward, my hope is to, I want to work smarter and not harder. That means a business that's as successful with less grind. I think for me, there's always a lot of resistance, with time and expectations. I want to lessen some of that. Um, I, I really need to take the next step as a publishing author. I really feel like, a lot of the goals I made were, get those print books out, find bigger audiences, meet more of, readers. And I think last, it's just evolving that community that has been a thorn in my side for years. Like I have not found a real effective way to embrace the writer community,
Hmm.
and expand my connection to the writer community. And so I'm really hopeful of branching out. Going to Alaska last year was great. I met a bunch of
Hmm.
people. I still have conversations with a few of them. Uh, I need more of that.
Yeah.
It's important. So, what about you? Look forward. Give me three things.
Um, I quite like the teaching and um, conferencing as well. So I'm going to continue pitching that. I do want to get back to fiction. I have an idea. I'm also like, I haven't looked at the idea for 6 months. So I'm kind of like, oh, I don't know if I like that or not anymore. So I want to revisit the idea and yeah, write a novel. I just want to get back to writing a novel. However, I do have several nonfiction books that are almost written, that kind of all fit into a series, a nonfiction series for writers. So I want
Right.
to get those. I mean, that'd be so easy to publish because they're already really written. So yeah. those are kind of my goals. And of course, keeping it with aligned action. So maybe that can be like a little piece of homework for you and I, is to like think about what our values are, and that way we know that any decision we
Right.
make, if it's going to be aligned with our business values, but also because we're, parts of families also, and we're thinking long-term trajectory, our personal values have to be part of that too.
Right. Right. I like that challenge.
Let's do it.
I like it. Let's
Okay.
do it.
Well, I will see you next week then,
See
Eric.
you next week.
And maybe I will come with a question for you.
Oh gosh. All right. All right. All right.
All right.
I like it.
I'll come up with a
Oh,
question to ask you for next week.
okay.
All
Love it.
right. Bye for now.
See you then.